The boardroom was silent, a silence so sharp it could cut through glass. All eyes were locked on the tall man at the far end of the table. His tailored navy suit hugged his frame perfectly, the glint of his gold watch catching the light every time he moved his hand. This was Jordan Matthews, one of the youngest black CEOs in America, a man who had built a billion-dollar empire from the ground up. He had walked into this meeting expecting to close the largest deal of his career, a $700 million partnership that would change the future of his company. But what he didn't expect was that the very people he was about to do business with would strip away his dignity in front of everyone. It started just hours before, in a luxury hotel lobby where the deal partners had gathered. The Winthrops, an influential white family with generations of wealth, were there to finalize details before the contract signing. Their patriarch, Charles Winthrop, was all smiles at first, but the moment Jordan walked in, their expressions shifted. The conversation went from polite greetings to subtle jabs, then open mockery. Charles's son laughed when Jordan extended his hand, and his wife made a comment just loud enough for the room to hear, questioning if he was the assistant sent to fetch coffee. Jordan froze for a second, but he didn't let the insult show. He had been through enough in life to know how to keep his composure. Still, each word they threw at him was like a stone aimed at his pride. They didn't just question his authority, they undermined it in front of his own staff, clients, and the media cameras waiting outside. What they didn't know was that Jordan wasn't the type of man to react in anger. He believed in letting people reveal their true selves, and then responding in a way they'd never forget. As they continued their smug, condescending remarks, Jordan's mind was already working. This deal, worth more than some companies could dream of, had been months in the making. Both sides had spent millions preparing for it. Everyone expected him to swallow the insult, sign the papers, and walk away richer. But Jordan was thinking about something far more valuable than money, respect. On his way to the private meeting room, Jordan caught sight of someone in the corner of the hotel cafe. A young black teen, maybe 17, was helping an older, pregnant woman to her seat. The boy smiled politely, then gave up his own chair for her without hesitation. The woman looked at him with surprise, placing a small folded note into his hand before she sat down. Jordan didn't know it yet, but that simple moment, that quiet act of kindness, would connect to his own decision in ways no one could imagine. Inside the meeting room, the Winthrops carried on as though they owned the air everyone breathed. Charles leaned back in his chair, wearing a smirk that seemed to say, "You'll take this deal because you need us." Every lawyer, every assistant, and every executive in the room could feel the tension, but no one dared speak up. Jordan glanced at the contract in front of him. His pen rested on the table. All it would take was a signature to make history. Cameras were ready outside to capture the handshake that would flood tomorrow's headlines. Everyone assumed it was a done deal, but Jordan's eyes weren't on the paper anymore. They were on the Winthrops, on the arrogance in their voices, on the way they had dismissed him, on the way they believed they could treat people however they pleased and still walk away winning. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly against the armrest. Then, without saying a word, he closed the folder and pushed it aside. The room went still. "What's the matter?" Charles asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Cold feet?" Jordan didn't answer right away. He simply smiled, the kind of smile that made people nervous when they didn't know what was coming next. And in that moment he knew exactly what he was about to do. It wouldn't just shock the Winthrops. It would shock everyone watching, and when he finally spoke, the words that left his mouth would not only erase the $700 million deal from the table, but also leave the Winthrops scrambling to pick up the pieces of a disaster they had created for themselves. But before that happened, something else was about to unfold, something that began with a young boy, a pregnant woman, and a note that held more power than anyone in that building could possibly understand. The boy was still sitting quietly in the cafe, holding the folded paper in his hand, unaware that what was written inside would change more than just his own life. It would become the key to everything that happened next. Jordan's eyes lingered on the boy in the cafe for a moment longer, though no one in the boardroom could see where his thoughts had wandered. There was something about that scene, the way the boy had moved without hesitation to help the pregnant woman, the quiet respect in his posture, that stuck with him. He'd seen many acts of kindness in his life, but this one seemed to pierce through the noise of the day. Maybe because it reminded him of himself, years ago, before the suits, the titles, and the billion-dollar valuations. Back when every decision he made came down to doing the right thing or doing the easy thing. He didn't know the boy's name, but he could picture the way his face had lit up when the woman whispered something and slipped the note into his hand. Jordan had caught the moment by accident, yet now it kept replaying in his mind like a scene in slow motion. He wondered if the boy had opened the note yet, or if he was still turning it over in his palm, feeling the weight of something he didn't yet understand. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, the Winthrops carried on as though nothing had shifted. Charles was pouring himself water, pretending not to notice Jordan's pause. His eldest son, Brandon, leaned in close to whisper something that made his younger brother snicker. They thought Jordan's hesitation was a sign of weakness, that he was intimidated by their power, maybe even desperate enough to overlook their insults. They didn't know Jordan Matthews, Jordan's assistant, Lisa, was seated 2 chairs away, her eyes flicking nervously between him and the contract. She knew him well enough to sense when something was brewing. He was calm, yes, but there was a certain stillness in his demeanor that always came before he made a move people didn't expect. Lisa had been with him long enough to witness the aftermath of such moves, deals collapsing, rivals scrambling, and entire companies realizing too late that they had underestimated him, but this was bigger than business. This was about the principle of it all. Jordan had spent years earning his place at tables like this, not because anyone invited him, but because he built his own table and made them notice. He knew what it was like to walk into a room and feel the weight of judgment before saying a single word. And here it was again, in full display, the smirks, the subtle dismissals, the way they looked at him as if he should be grateful just to breathe the same air. Outside, the hotel lobby bustled with activity. The press was gathering, their cameras ready to flash at the moment the deal was signed. The Winthrops had already leaked word to the media, framing the partnership as their gift to the industry, as though Jordan's company needed their blessing. To succeed, the reporters weren't there for Jordan. They were there for the Winthrops, and that made the sting of their arrogance burn hotter. In the cafe, the boy had finally unfolded the note. His hands trembled slightly, not because he expected anything grand, but because the woman's eyes had been so sincere when she gave it to him. The paper was small, torn from the corner of a receipt, but the handwriting was careful, almost elegant. He read the first line and froze. Whatever was written there made his eyebrows draw together in confusion, then surprise. He glanced around the cafe, as if searching for someone to confirm what he had just read, but the woman was gone. She had left without a sound. Leaving only her teacup and the crumpled napkin behind, the boy tucked the note into his jacket pocket, his mind spinning. He had no way of knowing that the contents of that note would link his path to Jordan's before the day was over. And Jordan, unaware of what had been written, was already standing on the edge of a decision that would shock everyone in the building. Back in the boardroom, Charles cleared his throat. "Shall we proceed?" His tone was casual, but there was an edge to it, a challenge. He wanted to push Jordan into signing, to reassert his dominance after the earlier tension. "We've all got busy schedules," Charles added, glancing at his watch as if his time was more valuable than anyone else's. Jordan didn't answer. He was looking at the pen in front of him, the silver glint of it under the overhead lights. To the others in the room, it might have seemed like a simple pause, but inside his mind, the weight of the moment was stacking higher and higher. Every insult, every smirk, every headline they had already written in their minds. He thought about his younger self, sitting in meetings where no one took him seriously. He thought about the employees in his company who looked up to him as proof that the rules could be rewritten. And he thought about the boy in the cafe, giving up his seat without needing thanks or recognition. Lisa shifted in her chair, almost leaning forward as if to speak, but she stopped herself. She knew better than to interrupt him when he was in this kind of headspace. The lawyers, sensing something was off, began shuffling papers just to fill the silence. Jordan finally looked up. His gaze swept across the Winthrops, one by one, resting last on Charles. It wasn't an angry stare. It was measured, almost calm, the kind of look a person gives when they've already made up their mind and are simply deciding when to let everyone else catch up, I think. Jordan began slowly, his voice even and steady. We need to take a step back. The air shifted. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed louder in the pause that followed. Charles tilted his head slightly, like he wasn't sure he'd heard correctly. Step back? We've been negotiating for months, Matthews. We're at the finish line. Jordan smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes, he said, the finish line isn't where you think it is. The meaning of his words didn't land right away. Brandon scoffed under his breath. The lawyers exchanged confused glances. Lisa looked down, biting the inside of her cheek. She knew this was it, the moment before the storm outside the meeting room. The boy from the cafe had walked toward the lobby exit, still thinking about the note in his pocket. His bus was due in 10 minutes, but he wasn't sure he wanted to leave just yet. Something told him he should stay. That same quiet instinct that had urged him to give up his seat was now telling him his day wasn't over. Not yet. And in the boardroom, Jordan was about to make sure the Winthrops would never forget his name. But before the words left his mouth, before he made the move that would erase $700 million from their grasp, his phone buzzed. A single text message. He glanced down at the screen. No name, just an unknown number. The message was short. Only 6 words. 6 words that made his eyes narrow, his grip on the phone tighten, and his entire plan shift in an instant. And those 6 words were the exact ones written on the note in the boy's pocket. Jordan's heart gave a small, sharp thump as he read the message again, just to make sure his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. The same 6 words, impossible, he thought. There was no way someone in this building could know about that note. The note he hadn't even touched, the note still folded in a stranger's pocket downstairs. Yet here it was, glowing on his screen like it had been meant for him all along. Lisa caught the slight change in his expression. Everything all right? She asked under her breath, careful not to draw attention. Jordan slid the phone face down on the table. Fine, he murmured, though his mind was anything but. He didn't have time to figure out how the words had found their way to him, not while the Winthrops were watching his every move. But deep inside, something told him this was no coincidence. The meeting limped forward with Charles trying to regain control. Look, Matthews, he said, his voice dropping into what he must have thought was a fatherly tone. I understand there's a lot at stake here. You've built something impressive, and we're offering you the kind of backing that could make it untouchable. But business isn't about feelings. It's about winning. Jordan tilted his head slightly, letting the words sink in. Winning. To the Winthrops, winning meant crushing whoever stood in their way. To him, winning meant leaving the table with his principles intact. He wondered if they even knew there was a difference. Meanwhile, downstairs in the cafe, the boy, whose name was Malik, was still turning the note over in his hands. He'd read it 3 times now, and it still didn't make sense. It wasn't a thank you message or a blessing like he'd expected. It was a directive, a clear instruction. 6 words that felt urgent, almost like a warning. Malik didn't understand why they made his chest tighten, but something about them felt heavy, as though he'd been given a responsibility he wasn't ready for. He checked the time. His bus would leave in 4 minutes. If he missed it, he'd have to wait another hour, and his mom hated when he got home late. But every time he thought about walking out, something in him whispered, not yet. In the boardroom, the tension thickened. Jordan's lawyers were exchanging nervous glances, unsure why their client seemed distracted. One of them leaned forward and tried to steer the conversation back to safe ground, but Jordan's mind kept circling back to those 6 words. His instinct told him they weren't random. They were connected to him, to this moment, maybe even to the decision he was about to make. Charles noticed the shift and pressed harder. You're not going to get another offer like this, he said. Think about your shareholders. Think about your employees. Do you want to explain to them why you walked away from nearly $1 billion because of—" He cut himself off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Jordan's eyes hardened. He knew exactly how Charles was going to finish that sentence. He also knew he was dangerously close to saying something that would burn this entire deal to the ground, while Jordan measured his words. Malik wandered out of the cafe and into the hotel lobby. He scanned the crowd, unsure of what he was looking for, until he saw the tall man in the navy suit through the glass walls of the meeting room upstairs. He didn't know who Jordan Matthews was, but something about the way the man sat, steady, composed yet ready to move, made Malik stop in his tracks. Then he saw it. Through a gap in the blinds, Jordan's phone lit up again. Malik couldn't read the screen from where he stood, but he didn't need to. He had the note, and something told him the same message had just reached that man. Upstairs, Jordan finally leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "Charles," he said quietly, "I know what you think this deal means. But you've misunderstood something. You think I need your name attached to mine to be legitimate. You think you can insult me in public and still expect me to shake your hand for the cameras. But there's a problem with that." Before he could finish, his phone buzzed a third time. This time, the message wasn't words, it was a photo. His breath caught. The picture was of a woman he didn't recognize. She was sitting on a bench, holding a paper cup, her face turned away as though she didn't want to be seen. But there was something unsettling about it, a familiarity he couldn't place. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was the edge of the same folded note Malik had in his pocket. Lisa noticed his fingers tighten on the phone. "Jordan?" she whispered again, more urgently this time. He didn't answer. His mind was already racing, connecting dots that shouldn't connect. Who was this woman? Why was the note in the picture? And how had a complete stranger downstairs been pulled into whatever this was? Malik, still frozen in the lobby, saw Jordan, glance down at his phone, and then look out toward the glass. For one strange, electric second, their eyes almost met. Malik didn't know why, but his first instinct was to reach into his pocket and clutch the note tighter. Upstairs, Charles was growing impatient. "Enough games, Matthews. Either sign the contract or tell us you're walking away so we can move on." Jordan didn't look at him. His gaze was locked on the lobby below. Somewhere in his gut, he knew the decision he was about to make wasn't just about business anymore. There was something bigger unfolding, and whatever it was, it had just found its way into his world. The Winthrops thought they were in control of this moment. They didn't see the undercurrent pulling Jordan's focus away from them. They didn't see Malik standing below, holding the one thing that might explain the messages. And they had no idea that before the day was over, the deal they thought was theirs would be the last thing on their minds. Jordan picked up the pen. But instead of signing, he tapped it against the table, slow and deliberate. He could feel everyone's eyes on him, waiting for the final stroke that would seal their victory. But in his mind, all he could hear were those 6 words echoing over and over, louder than the voices in the room and downstairs. Malik finally unfolded the note again, staring at the message as though it might change. But it didn't. It was still the same 6 words. The same 6 words now in 2 places at once. The same 6 words that would soon pull him and Jordan into the same storm, one neither of them had asked for, but both were about to face. Jordan's grip on the pen tightened until his knuckles turned pale. Every second stretched like a wire pulled to the point of snapping. He could feel the Winthrops staring at him, the weight of their expectation pressing against the room like thick air. But his mind wasn't on the contract anymore. It was on the lobby below, on the boy holding the note, and on the picture of the woman who somehow tied all of this together. The 6 words looped in his head with unnerving clarity. Not fading, not letting him think of anything else. He hadn't even decided whether to respond to the messages. Whoever sent them knew where he was, what he was doing, and exactly when to strike. That meant one thing. They were watching. Lisa shifted beside him, her pen clicking nervously in her hand. She leaned forward, whispering, "Jordan, you don't have to do this now." "You can stall." "I'm not stalling," he murmured. Eyes still on the glass wall overlooking the lobby. Malik was still there. his posture tense, eyes darting between Jordan and the elevators. He couldn't explain it, but his gut told him. He needed to get that note into Jordan's hands. Every instinct screamed it was important, even though he didn't understand why. He took a hesitant step toward the elevators, but stopped when a man in a dark suit stepped into his path. The man wasn't hotel staff, and he wasn't there for coffee. His expression was unreadable, but the way his eyes flicked to Malik's pocket made the boy's stomach knot. Upstairs, Charles was growing restless. He leaned forward, voice sharp. "Matthews, I don't know what game you're playing, but we don't have all day. Either sign or this meeting is over." Jordan turned his head slowly, fixing him with a look that didn't blink. "You think this is about time?" he said quietly. "It's not. It's about control." The words made Charles bristle, but Jordan didn't elaborate. He slid the contract back across the table, not toward Charles, but toward Lisa. She caught the movement. Instantly, not a sign of surrender, but a signal. Something was happening, something that had nothing to do with the Winthrops. His phone buzzed again. This time, no words. Just another image, a closer shot of the woman. And in this one, she was holding up the note toward the camera. The 6. Words were clear, almost too clear, like they wanted him to memorize them. Jordan's jaw tightened. Whoever this was, they weren't bluffing. And they were escalating. Malik, still in the lobby, was now facing the man in the dark suit. "Is there a problem?" Malik asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man smiled faintly, though there was nothing warm about it. "That piece of paper in your pocket," he said softly. "It's not yours." Before Malik could respond, the elevator doors opened with a quiet chime. Jordan stepped out, flanked by Lisa, leaving a stunned boardroom behind. His sudden appearance in the lobby drew eyes immediately, not from the reporters, but from the man in the dark suit. Malik's relief was immediate, but short-lived. The suited man took a step closer, as though to intercept. Jordan's gaze locked on Malik instantly. He didn't know the boy, but something in the kid's expression, urgency mixed with fear, told him this wasn't random. He closed the distance in quick, deliberate strides. The Winthrops were now visible at the railing above, watching the scene unfold with confusion. Cameras clicked from the press area, though no one knew what they were capturing yet. The tension in the lobby was a live wire, every second humming louder. "Do you have something for me?" Jordan asked, his voice low but firm. Malik nodded and reached into his pocket, but the man in the dark suit moved first. His hand shot out, not toward Jordan, but toward Malik's jacket. Malik flinched back, nearly dropping the note. Jordan stepped between them, his stance shifting in a way that made the suited man hesitate. "You don't want to do that," Jordan said, his tone calm but dangerous. The man didn't answer. His eyes flicked to the cameras, then back to Jordan. Whatever this was about, he didn't want it public. He turned and walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as he had appeared. Malik's hands shook as he held out the folded paper. "It's yours, I think," he said. Jordan took it carefully, feeling the same strange weight Malik had felt. He unfolded it, reading the 6 words again. His pulse quickened. They were identical to the text messages, but seeing them in ink somehow made them feel more real. Lisa glanced at the note, then at Jordan. "What does it mean?" she asked quietly. Jordan didn't answer. He was already scanning the room, looking for the woman from the photo, but she wasn't there. Only strangers and flashes of cameras. From above, Charles called down, his voice carrying through the lobby. "Matthews, are we going to finish this deal or not?" Jordan looked up at him, expression unreadable. Every eye in the building was now on him. The Winthrops, the reporters, the hotel guests, even Malik. The moment had shifted from a business transaction to something far bigger, and everyone could feel it. He slipped the note into his jacket pocket, straightened his shoulders, and took a slow breath. Whatever was coming next would decide everything. The $700 million deal, the mystery of the note, and the shadowy figure who clearly didn't want the truth to surface. And Jordan was ready to face it head on, but before he could take another step, his phone buzzed again. One final message lit up the screen. This time, there were no words, just a live photo feed, and in it, the woman from the note looking straight into the camera, whispering his name.